Hallo und herzlich willkommen zu unserem Webinar. Das Thema heute ist, wie Sie Salesforce Deployments mit Gearset beschleunigen können. In diesem Webinar erfahren Sie, was Gearset ist, warum Sie Gearset einsetzen sollten, wie Sie mit Gearset Profile in Salesforce deployen können, wie Sie mit Gearset Abhängigkeiten erkennen, wie Sie mit Gearset ein Rollback durchführen können und mehr zu Continuous Integration. Der Hauptteil des Webinars ist heute auf Englisch. Bitte beachten Sie, dass Sie während des Webinars stumm geschaltet sind. Bitte nutzen Sie für die Fragen die Chat-Funktion. Wir werden diese entweder am Ende des Webinars beantworten oder direkt zwischendrin. Sie können die Fragen gerne auf Deutsch stellen und wir werden sie für das Team von Gearset übersetzen. Mein Name ist Sarah Zilken, ich bin gerne Ihre Ansprechpartnerin für die nächsten Schritte im Nachgang. Präsentiert wird Ihnen heute Gearset von Joe Moss, Account Executive bei Gearset. Herr Masseyus von H&W Consult wird Ihnen zu Beginn typische Probleme bei Salesforce Deployments mit den Bordmitteln aufzeigen, die uns als langjähriger Salesforce-Partner auch schon oft begegnet sind. Genau, Herr Marcel, ich übergebe das Wort an dich.
Herzlich willkommen zusammen. Ich freue mich, mit Ihnen heute über das Thema Salesforce Deployments zu sprechen. Mein Name ist Marcel Joost und ich bin einer von 3 Geschäftsführern der H&W Consult. Ich selbst bin 10-fach zertifizierter Salesforce Architekt, Consultant und Administrator. Nun starten wir zusammen mit einer kurzen Unternehmensvorstellung. Wir sind der älteste Salesforce-Partner in Europa und direkt 2 Jahre nach Salesforce im Jahre 2001 gegründet. Schon früh haben wir uns zu 100% auf Salesforce-Dienstleistungen fokussiert. Mit 20 Mitarbeitern an 4 Standorten in Deutschland und einem großen Partnernetzwerk sind wir sehr gut aufgestellt, um auch größere Salesforce-Projekte für Sie zu realisieren. Falls Sie aktuell einen strategischen Implementierungspartner mit viel Know-how suchen, kommen Sie gerne jederzeit auf mich zu. Ich freue mich, mit Ihnen über Ihre Anforderungen zu sprechen. Vernetzen Sie sich einfach per LinkedIn oder Xing mit mir. In über 800 Projekten haben wir natürlich tausende Salesforce-Deployments durchgeführt mit unseren Kunden. Wir haben festgestellt, dass ein gutes Deployment-Tool hier viel Arbeit und Probleme vermeiden kann. Lassen Sie mich kurz nur 7 Probleme mit den Bordmitteln von Salesforce ansprechen, um Ihnen ein paar Use Cases zu geben, wann es sinnvoll ist, ein Tool wie Gearset einzusetzen und wo der Salesforce-Standard an seine Grenzen kommt. Starten wir mit dem ersten Punkt, das sind Profil-Deployments. Profil-Deployments können mit Change-Set sehr aufwendig sein, da nur die Änderungen mitgenommen werden, die Sie auch im Change-Set mit drin haben. Natürlich können Sie Permission-Sets nutzen oder auch darauf zurückgreifen, aber diese sind nicht für alle Use Cases geeignet. Gearset bietet aber Ihnen hier eine sehr gute Möglichkeit, auch Profile zu deployen, was später gezeigt wird. Kommen wir zum zweiten Punkt. Wenn Sie in einem Projekt sind mit vielen Entwicklern oder Administratoren, müssen Sie mehrere User-Stories abnehmen lassen, zum Beispiel auf einer UAT-Sandbox. Dann ist es so, dass Sie nicht unbedingt alle Änderungen am Ende live nehmen werden. Und der Rest, der bleibt vielleicht noch bestehen und wird nicht live genommen. Jetzt haben Sie dort dann die Aufgabe, diese ganzen Change-Sets wieder zusammenzuführen. Und das kann sehr aufwendig sein, dort dann ein Change-Set zu bauen. Gearset bietet Ihnen hier die Möglichkeit, einzelne Deployments zusammenzufassen. Dies spart Ihnen am Ende viel Zeit beim Zusammenstellen und im Vergleich zu Change-Sets ist das auf jeden Fall eine der Stärken von Gearset. Kommen wir zum dritten Punkt. Falls Sie mal in der Vergangenheit Änderungen wieder zurücknehmen mussten, dann wissen Sie, wie aufwendig dies sein kann. Gearset erstellt bei einem Deployment Backups der Metadaten und gibt Ihnen dann die Möglichkeiten, diese Änderungen auch wieder zurückzurollen. Das heißt, diese Rollback-Funktion ist einfach ganz wichtig, damit Sie sicher durch Ihr Deployment kommen. Kommen wir zum vierten Punkt. Über die Zeit laufen Sandboxen leider ständig auseinander. Dies kann dann zu Problemen führen. Gearset gibt Ihnen Möglichkeiten, einfach Sandboxen miteinander zu vergleichen und auch diese wiederum zu synchronisieren. Kommen wir zum fünften Punkt. Wenn Sie mal Change-Sets erstellt haben, wissen Sie, wie schwierig es ist, auch Abhängigkeiten alle zu erfassen. Zum Beispiel ein Feld ist in einem Layout, ist in einem Profil, auch in Validierungsregeln enthalten. Und auch in vielen anderen Dingen müssen Sie dann noch zusätzlich in Ihr Change-Set aufnehmen, damit Sie auch alles mitgenommen haben. Gearset gibt Ihnen hier einfache Möglichkeiten, die Abhängigkeiten zu erkennen und diese mit ins Deployment aufzunehmen. Kommen wir zum sechsten Punkt. Falls Sie Daten mitnehmen müssen und diese deployen müssen, dann kann das sehr aufwendig sein. und müssen dort mit Bordmitteln wie zum Beispiel dem Data Loader arbeiten. Zum Beispiel bei CPQ ist es eine schwierigere Aufgabe. Hier hilft Ihnen Gearset mit der Funktionalität der sogenannten Data Deployments stark weiter, um einfach Daten von der einen Org in die andere zu übernehmen. Kommen wir zum 7. Punkt. Sollten Sie komplexe Automatisierungen benötigen, Stichwort Continuous Integration oder Continuous Deployment, ist Gearset eine sehr gute und flexible Wahl, um es Ihnen zu ermöglichen, dies zu implementieren. Lassen Sie mich noch kurz zu unserem Produktportfolio ein paar Worte verlieren. Wir sind ein Multi-Cloud-System-Integrator und bieten somit Ihnen alle Salesforce Clouds aus einer Hand an. Wir unterstützen Sie im gesamten Lebenszyklus mit Salesforce von der Planung, zum Beispiel Strategieworkshops, Anforderungsaufnahme, Architekturberatung, Business Case Rechnungen, bis hin zur Integration von Salesforce in Ihre schon vorhandene IT-Landschaft, inklusive der Integration in SAP oder Navision. Hier haben wir auch schon über 80 Integrationsprojekte erfolgreich abgeschlossen. Und am Ende kommen wir zur Optimierung, das heißt der Schulung, dem Support, dem Release-Management der vorhandenen Lösung. Auch hier bieten wir Ihnen alles an, was Sie brauchen, um hier erfolgreich zu werden. So viel nun zu unserem Vorwort von der H&W und jetzt übergebe ich an unseren langjährigen strategischen Partner, der Gearset. Vielen Dank.
Hello everyone, I am Joe. I'm an account exec here at Gearset. I'm going to run you through a quick slide presentation. Then I'm going to jump into the Gearset app and to kind of show you what that looks like in real life, in real time. If any questions crop up, I do have a colleague of mine, Daniel Fenner, who's also on this call. So in the questions tab, if you type any questions in there, he'll be able to get back to you. So here's just a brief agenda of what I'm going to run through today. So first, I'm just going to give you a very brief overview of Gearset as a company. But then when we jump into the app, I'm going to show you the speed of implementation, how we're able to set up a compare and deploy. And a part of that, we're going to be deploying some profiles, permissions, and also viewing dependencies from within the Gearset UI. After I go through and create that deployment, I'm going to show you how we can easily roll that back, and also how we're able to combine packages after the fact as well. And if enough time at the end, we'll kind of allude towards how we're able to set up relatively simple or potentially relatively complex CI/CD processes, all from within Gearset. So a little bit of a background on the company. It was founded around 2015. It span out of Redgate, which is a Microsoft DevOps company. And in the past 3 years, we've really kind of exploded in headcount. So we've gone from 7 to 100 employees over the past 3 years, myself included in that number. We're headquartered in Cambridge in the United Kingdom, but we have very recently just opened an office over in the US as well, within Chicago. We're solely focused as a business on Salesforce DevOps, so kind of keep our expertise specific to the Salesforce ecosystem. We currently support and are used by over 1,100 customers, and that really does range from Fortune 500 enterprise accounts with teams up to 50, 60 people, and right across to individual consultants as well, and everywhere in between, small, medium businesses and mid-market too. The way we position Gearset kind of in the Salesforce DevOps ecosystem is the first thing is we want to be able to fit easily into your existing workflow. Now, this isn't to say we don't help customers create best practices or work to the best way that they can. It's more to illustrate the flexibility of the tool. So we don't prescribe a way of teams to work using Gearset. As I said, we will advise, but ultimately you're able to work in whatever way makes the most sense for your team structure and also your org structures as well. A big part of that as well is being able to get up and running in a few hours. So during this, I kind of show you in real time how you're able to implement the tool. I'll get into it a little bit later, but Gearset is non-native to Salesforce, and that's very much by design. And a lot of the speed up in this implementation is because of that. And finally, we really set out to give you everything you'd possibly need within a single tool. So again, we'll get onto the different aspects of that. Today, we're looking predominantly at metadata changes, but that does also include data changes, automations, and data backup as well. There's just kind of a list of some of the larger companies that we work for, Salesforce themselves, Coca-Cola. I think we just released a case study with Zillow the other day as well. But as said, we also have individual consultants and anywhere in between leveraging Gearset to kind of their own use cases. The one key metric we focus on, particularly around the metadata, is deployment success. So across our entire customer base, I think this might have ticked over to 94% now, but this is what we're consistently seeing as a success rate across all those teams for using Gearset. It's hard to get specifics when it comes to kind of the Salesforce alternatives, so chain sets, but we usually, when conversations, we're seeing teams rarely breaking 50% success rate. So kind of straight away, you can see an almost doubling of the success from changing from chain sets to Gearset. As mentioned, we try to keep the everything under one roof. So today I'm going to be taking you through metadata, but as a part of that, we're able to kind of monitor your environments as well. Move data. So not only is moving metadata through environments important, being able to seed those testing environments with useful data can be just as important in the DevOps process. And finally, data backup. So the ability to back up both the metadata and the data of your orgs, and then crucially restore those after any potential data loss scenario. I'm not going to spend too long on this slide. I guess there's quite a bit of words there, but essentially it's to illustrate that teams leverage our tool in different ways, but we don't leave them to it. So the example I'm going to give here is kind of down here on a DevOps maturity scale, where we're going to just essentially take an existing process with chain sets, replace it with Gearset, and see a ton of value from that. But we'll regularly work with teams to kind of bring in source control, bring in SFDX, kind of bring up smart alerts with backups to progress their DevOps at their own pace, kind of whatever pace is necessary for that team and that company, but just to show the scalability of the tool and how it can grow with you as your company does. Now that's over, I'm going to jump into the Gearset demo. Before this call, I've been doing a bit of work in a dev environment. I want to compare that to my staging environment, see what the differences are, and then select those changes to pull them through higher up my pipeline. I come out now into gearset.com. So as said, we're a web app, so everything is accessed through here. If you just come to gearset.com, a couple of things I'd like to call out before I dive into the app, in case anyone goes onto our website later. The resources tab is a great way to kind of get in bearings and learnings of the tool. We have some product videos that are nice, up to date, and also our documentation, advice and answers. So any questions or any topics you're interested in, open up this tab, type in your question there. The likelihood is there's an article written about it. I also want to allude to the bottom right corner here. So this is the access to our support team. These are in-house, based in Cambridge. So if you're ever stuck, you can't find anything, whether using the app, whether on our website, anywhere you're interacting with Gearset, just open up this and send us a message. This won't get picked up by a bot. It'll get picked up by our team, and they'll be able to answer you and point you in the right direction. Finally, in the top right corner, we have a start free trial button. So we really encourage people to do a free trial of Gearset. This is self-serve, so you can kind of come in here, select it yourself. No need to enter credit card details, anything like that. And it's not lightweight. It gives you full access to the entirety of Gearset, the same version it would be for a paid customer, just because we have a lot of confidence in the tool, and we want you to really try it in real life scenarios against your own orgs in your own environments. I, of course, already have an account, so I'm just going to go straight ahead and log in. The first time you log in, there is a setup wizard. I would encourage you to kind of go through that. I'm going to assume you haven't though, just to show you how you would then set up implementation to be able to use the tool to its entirety. Down the left-hand side, we have the different kind of buckets of functionality, as I mentioned, that the tool houses. So the first is the metadata deployments. This is what I'll be taking you through today. Then with the automation suite, so that allows you to set up things like change monitoring, so you get notified of any changes that happen in the metadata of any orgs. Unit testing, so we're able to run daily unit tests, potentially in a UAT environment. Continuous integration, this is where you'll be able to build out a simple or relatively complex automated workflow. Then the data deployments, so the ability to move data from one environment to another. It could be you're seeding a sandbox with masked production data, or it could be that you're pushing CPQ data up through the development pipeline. Data backup, the ability to back up an environment and then crucially restore both the metadata and the data. But the thing you kind of want to do the first time you come in the app is under the My Connections tab to connect up to your Salesforce orgs. Now this looks like a relatively busy screen at the moment. That's just because I have a lot of orgs connected up. So Gearset doesn't limit you on org connection numbers, so you're able to connect to as many orgs as you're working with. But for you, when you come in here, add in your organization, type in your username, choose what type of org it is, hit authorize, that'll spin you out to Salesforce. Just type in your credentials, allow Gearset access, and then you're good to go and connected and ready. So essentially the setup time is as long as it takes you to type in your credentials to your Salesforce environments, and then you're good to go to leverage the tool to its entirety. To kind of allude towards scalability of the tool as well, you're able to connect to source control and Jira, so ticketing services from the screen straight out of the box as well. I won't be showing a demo with source control here, but just again to kind of illustrate the scalability of the tool and how it's able to grow as your development, your DevOps processes grow. I already connected up my orgs, so then I'm able to come in here to leverage the tool to its entirety. On here, I'm able to select a source metadata location and a target metadata location. The combinations that you can see beneath you here is kind of limited. There's no stopping you pushing from any one to any other. But in this example, I've been doing work in a dev environment. I want to push it through to my staging environment. So I'm just going to choose Salesforce org, scroll down, web dev. That's the one I've been doing working this morning. And I want to push that through to my web staging. Now, before I look into these both to see the differences between the two, I need to tell Gearset what I actually want to see. So at the bottom here, we have the metadata comparison filter, and that's just telling Gearset the metadata types you're interested in seeing. You can, of course, compare all. So Gearset supports 148 different metadata types, all accessed via Salesforce's metadata APIs. But the likelihood here is you'll kind of have an improved process if you drill down into the specifics of metadata types you're interested in seeing. We have some great defaults. So if you're kind of unsure, the first few times you use this, default comparison 64 is a great place to start. 64 of the most common metadata types you're likely to be using. But as you kind of grow to use Gearset more and understand what your orgs look like through the metadata API, you're able to come in here and manage a custom filter, select exactly what you want to include within that filter, include or disclude certain managed packages, and ultimately save new filters to share with the team. So you don't have to come in here too many times, but you're only looking at the things you're actually interested in looking in. I'm going to go with the default CI comparison for today, because I want to pull through Apex class, some custom objects, and show you some of how we're able to deploy profiles. Then when you're happy with the setup, you just hit compare now. And what Gearset is doing here, we're logging into both the source and the target at the same time. We're downloading the metadata, only looking for the types that you asked us to look for against Salesforce's metadata API. We'll then take that retrieved data, and Gearset's IP essentially breaks down that retrieved data and then compares both source and target side by side to a granular level to show you exactly how they look the same and exactly how they look different. And if there's any way for us to present those differences to you in a nicer way, we'll do so. So we try to make it as easy to see the changes and what looks different within your two environments. So next we come to this screen here. This is where you can visually see the comparison of two environments. Along the top, we have changed, items, new, deleted, all, and selected. Underneath, we have the individual items. And at the bottom here, we have the semantic diff, where we'll visually show you where those differences or additions or deletions exist. So you can see here, I've got a custom field. I've been doing some work, some changes on this pick list. I can straight away see exactly where and what those changes are. And to include for deployment, I simply tick the box there. It falls into selected items and it'll get carried forward with the process. I'm able to view it in XML and object view, but as mentioned, if there's any way for us to make it look a little bit nicer, we'll do so. Moving through to new items. So these are things that exist within my source, but not within my target. I want to pull through this Apex class and we do some work there. You'll notice that each item has a little chevron next to it. Now, when we were talking about dependencies, if we expand these, we're able to view the dependencies from within this view. So I want to pull through this custom field, discount percentage. I can expand the field and I can see there it has a dependency, discount rate. So to pull that through, I also have to pull through any of its dependencies. I'm actually going to forget to do that. These are the sort of things that can be quite easy to forget, to show you how Gearset has some proprietary problem analyzers built in that pick up on things like this and really help us get towards that 93%, 94% success rate. Within these chevrons, we're also able to deploy profiles. So I have a custom field here, sales demo field. I tick that, but I don't necessarily want to deploy that to every profile. I can come in here and select, I just want to deploy that for the admin profile. I'm able to drill down to FLS granularity from within Gearset. I could, of course, kind of have any combination I so wish of that when trying to deploy profiles and permissions. Gearset also supports destructive changes, so things that exist within my target but not within my source. So I have an Apex class here, I don't want that anymore. So as part of the same deployment, I could just tick the box there and include that destructive change as part of the same process. The All Items tab essentially just shows me all the items that fall within both environments under the metadata types I've selected, so the 8 types that I've selected. But it could be a useful view to kind of see what's going on within your environments. But you can also filter any of these columns. So if this was a shared environment, multiple people making changes, there's only me in here, so it just says Joe Moss, but I'd be able to filter this, view only my own things, kind of see when things were last changed on, ignore all the background noise, ignore colleagues' work, and kind of work from this view here, as well as, of course, filtering by end of the way. There's also a global filter if you know exactly what you're looking for. Selected items has just been being populated as I've gone through the process. Now at this stage, I have a few options. I, of course, can hit next to proceed to the problem analysis that I mentioned, but maybe there's something missing within the screen that I thought would be there. Perhaps it's just a case if you forgot a metadata type, you're able to update the metadata filter from this window so you don't have to go right back to the beginning of the process. Just hit refresh comparison, change it, and then that will then pull through those extra metadata types. Or it could be a case of I don't have permission to deploy, so I can only have permissions as an end user to compare. And it could be a case where I can save this as a draft deployment. It will live up there for a colleague to come and pick up at a later date, or maybe it's the end of the week, maybe I'm halfway through a deployment. Either way, you'll be able to save that as a draft deployment to pick up later. Export what you have thus far, but I'm going to go ahead and proceed to that problem analysis. So this is where Gearset itself is checking your deployment. So we have millions of deployments go through a Gearset from thousands of customers. So it means we're pretty good at knowing what makes a successful deployment and what doesn't. And then we're able to create these problem analyzers that run over your deployment before it goes through to then say, we think this might not go through because of this, therefore we suggest this fix. So in this window, there's kind of 3 separate problem analyzers that you can see here. The first one is suggested fixes. So exactly as I just described, we've noticed a problem here. So in this instance, some items reference components that aren't in the target. And we've given you a solution, which is to add these missing components to the package to make it more likely to succeed. So I'm essentially just adding that missing dependency. So any of the suggested fixes will give you the problem, give you a solution, and offer you a tick box to include that. You can ignore this and still progress, but essentially what we're saying, we think this is going to fail unless you do this. We also bring up some warnings. So the example here is that new items found with permissions are not included in the deployment. So as you saw, I was deploying a custom field, but only selected the admin profile. It's essentially flagging that up for me, that I've not included the permissions for all profiles. So essentially a warning, we'll give you a warning. We're not giving you a suggested fix because we can't necessarily. We're just kind of flagging to you that something looks a bit unusual. And finally, because I included an Apex class, we've ran PMD, open source static code analysis, over the top of that Apex class, and we've picked up any kind of error that's been hit against your particular rule set. Again, we're not going to offer you a fix for this, but we'll kind of highlight exactly what that is and then allow you to remedy as you see fit. I'm happy with the warning though. I'm happy with the code quality. So I'm just going to hit next to proceed through the process. The screen you see here is just a summary of everything that I've taken through. So everything that I've selected. You notice there's a few things of no difference. They're just included because that's what allows Gearset to deploy to such a granularity. top right corner here, you give the deployment a friendly name. So I'll get onto deployment history in a minute, but we do recommend you come up with some kind of naming convention that makes these things searchable. Deployment notes, so we can make this a required field, so the whole team has to do a who, what, where, when of what happened. For the sake of kind of running through this, actually I didn't remove a checkbox, that's a lie. I removed an Apex class. Down here, you can see we have integrations to ticketing services. So this process here, so this me changing the those changes to my pick list, bringing through these custom fields, is all a part of a specific project. In this instance, it's sell request. Now we're to select, that's JMC1, and I can update that from within Gearset's window. Now I've done, I have a few options available to me. I can download the package, I can export. As you can see, I have the deploy now and the validate deployment options. I can also select what tests to run, same with the deployments, or schedule the deployment for later. In this instance, I'm going to validate the deployment first. Perhaps in some circumstances, I may not have permissions to deploy to a certain environment, but I still have permissions to validate. Excuse me. That validation was successful. And at this point, I'm able to view that validation in Salesforce, schedule the deployment for later. I'll just hit the deploy now button. So I'm just going to go ahead and deploy. And that will push those changes from my source through to my target. As you can see, deployment successful, took 8 seconds for that. But now we've made that deployment, of course, we kind of, I guess, replace the chain sets in that scenario. Now we can kind of look at the post deployment steps and how we're able to use and manipulate that specific deployment. So this, as you can see there, was my 605th successful deployment within my specific team in Gearset. And so this run and every 604 before it now live within deployment history. So we come into the deployment history tab, you're able to see exactly what I just pushed through. It's been populated. And from this window, I'm able to manipulate it in certain ways. But just to show, I'm also able to see what the rest of the team have done. So you can see there, I've been doing quite a lot of deployments this morning. Jed, a colleague of mine, was doing quite a few yesterday. And I can kind of view from all time to see exactly what myself and the team are doing. And again, depending on permissions, but I'm able to dive into any of these and manipulate in certain ways. So I can roll back. So it can be a case of, it was a successful deployment. It went through okay, but this either in its entirety or perhaps incrementally, I want to roll that back. So maybe it's just one or two things. You're able to just click the button there, set up another compare and deploy, and that will roll back those changes for you. I'm also able to take that package and deploy to a new target. So I guess in this instance, I push from a dev to a staging. I can deploy that to a new target, maybe straight to a UAT environment. I'm also able to download a full report. So this deployment I did yesterday, or any other deployment that we do, will produce a full PDF report. And again, it's just a who, what, where, when, and why, if they have good note taking of what went on. I can jump in and view the comparison. So if I kind of want to see what colleagues have been up to, what pushes they've changed, I'm able to jump in and view that semantics diff screen I showed you, where you're able to see the differences between two environments to see exactly what's going on in the development pipeline. Few details will take me through to that summary page that I showed you. But we're also able to clone this package, clone it, select a new source and a new target, and kind of deploy that package, as well as combining packages as well. So myself and Jed could have been working on a similar project, maybe to combine those packages and send them over to a new environment. So that is, I guess, very much the basics of how we're able to set up a compare and deploy. So we looked at pushing from a dev environment to a staging. We selected, using the metadata filter, what we were interested in seeing, compared the two environments to each other, saw what was different, selected the changes that I wanted to push through, including being able to visualize these C dependencies or get them caught if I miss them, as well as deploying across certain profiles down at the FLS level. Made that deployment through, and then I can ultimately manipulate that after the fact in multiple ways. When it comes to CI/CD, I guess it's difficult for me to kind of share a one-size-fits-all because that just is not the case. So when we engage with customers, it will be a case of we sit down and we'd work through how many orgs you have, what your current pipeline looks like, and what the member of the teams, what team members you have as well, and what their familiarity and comfortability is with source control, for example. And from there, we're able to suggest a particular branching strategy, a particular workflow, to kind of help them implement and then work from. Before I kind of show you a potential workflow, I want to show you another key feature. So Marcel talked about metadata backup with kind of the rollbacks. So that does indeed work as a rollback. Any deployment you make within Gearset, you'll be able to roll that back after the fact. But there's also, if we open up the left-hand side again, and we come into the automation suite, we also have change monitoring, which is where we're able to set up a monitoring job on any org of interest. So an example would be a production org. You kind of want to compare itself to itself every day and then let me know what's changed. This, of course, one, keeps everybody aware of what's happening in production. So there's hot fixes that you're unaware of, or just any changes that are happening and you've been working further down the development pipeline. You need to be aware of what your actual end target is looking like. So the way we do that, add a new change monitoring job, super simple. Choose a time of day you want it to run, give it a name, choose a particular org you're interested in looking at. In this instance, it will probably be a production org. Choose how you'd like to be notified of that. So whether it's you kind of want to be notified within Slack or a Teams channel is quite popular, or integrate via Chatter, but ultimately you can be emailed. And again, you're able to choose what metadata you're interested in, hit save, and that job will run every day. Now, if we see my job here, Joe's Prod, exactly the same as the one I just showed you to that I set up, I can see instantly that there's been a difference in the last 24 hours. But from this window here, I can see there's a difference. I can turn it on and off. I can view the history, edit that job. I can take a snapshot. But if I jump straight in, view the history, I can see how my org's metadata changes over time. So I can see there, yes, in the last 24 hours, there was one difference. Now my org's probably quite boring. I kind of run webinars and demos. But essentially from any of these, you are able to roll back. So I can see here, there was a difference on March the 24th. I've only got it filtered to 30 days, but you can view to all time. And from this run here, I'm able to jump in again, view that comparison screen to see exactly what did change, but I'm also able to roll that back. So kind of any day, any changes happen, you can roll those back after the fact. If you know, for instance, your org was in a stable environment 1 week ago, you kind of need a very quick patch, you could roll back, and that will be captured from within this change monitoring window here. Moving through the automation suite, we have unit testing. So this is, again, where we're basically able to run your unit test on a daily basis. The way you add a new job, very much the same. Choose a time of day, give it a name, choose what org you're interested in testing, give yourself a minimum code coverage. Salesforce is 75%. You, of course, can kind of change it as you see fit. You can include which specific tests you'd like to run, and again, how you like to be notified. And that job would just run every day. You can see here, I have a unit testing on my staging. Coverage is low. It's 77% code coverage, but I've got my threshold set for 80%. And again, you can just jump in, view the history, see how that changed over time. So if you're working downstream, you could be notified ahead of time that some of your test classes are out of sync and you've got failing tests. Finally, with the continuous integration, before I share the screen, I want to briefly walk through a potential workflow. So the plan isn't to kind of derail this conversation and take it away from the core benefits you have of just replacing change sets and manually using Gearset, which is how we would recommend the vast majority of our customers starting with the tool, because so much value can be derived just from that. But as with the DevOps matrix that I showed you in the presentation, we do try to kind of steer teams, if they so wish, towards a more automated workflow with source control. So what we have here is just a relatively simple, and I guess entry level, if you want, source-driven DevOps with Gearset. And again, this is not me prescribing it to any teams necessarily. It's just a good way to illustrate how we can fit nicely into a workflow. So the first thing you'll kind of notice here is we have 3 Salesforce environments: Dev Sandbox, UAT, and production. And underneath on the diagram, we have our source control. So the way we kind of want to flip the current process on its head is master is now our source of truth. So the first thing you do is use Gearset's compare and deploy to compare production to a master branch to then push those changes across, and now master is your source of truth. Through any development process, you'd come into Gearset, you'd create a feature branch. This again can all be done from within the Gearset UI, just with a few clicks. You then refresh your Dev Sandbox. So your Dev Sandbox is now nicely in sync with that feature branch, which is the same as master, which is your source of truth. You'd then make regular and frequent pushes from your Dev Sandbox through to that feature branch. Again, just using the manual compare and deploy, as I just showed you, the UI looks and feels exactly the same, whether you're using source control or whether you're pushing to and from a Salesforce org. When you're happy with the changes as part of that particular ticket or that particular project, create a pull request, again, just with a few clicks through Gearset. Once that pull request has been merged to your master, this is where we're able to fire off any number really of automated jobs. In this instance, I've got 2 automated jobs set up. One of them is a continuous deployment job, and one of them is a continuous validation job. So as soon as this merge happens, we'd automatically deploy master, which now looks like master plus all the changes I've made, into my UAT, ready for our testing. At the same time, we'll validate it against production. We wouldn't recommend setting up an automatic deployment into production. The final piece there is that change monitoring, as I mentioned, running on production and notifying us of any changes. So I guess just to illustrate what you can kind of create is you're just able to build in, again, this is a relatively simple one, these automated workflows that make life a lot easier and ensure your process is nicely in sync going forward. Everybody's working from the same particular workflow. And once it's set up, you don't really need to change it too much, but also as new members of the team join, you don't necessarily need to understand how this is set up. It's just a case of, I just need to worry about this bit here, my actual normal development process. Everything else is nicely done automatically. So coming into the continuous integration app, the way you'd actually set these up is kind of super simple. So I guess ignore some of this. Again, might look a little bit messy at the moment because we have multiple people in our team. We're able to just quickly add a new deployment job and add a new validation only job. And it's a very similar UI and window, slightly more options, admittedly, but essentially it's the same way, whereby you set a source location, you set a target location, choose what test to run, how often you want that job to run. It could be a case of when the branch is updated, of course, or it could be time bound. A few more options in terms of static code analysis, etc. And you just let yourself how you'd like to be notified of when that job runs. I'm not going to run through this in any detail because I guess it's unique and individual to the team that's setting up their workflow. But just to kind of show you the UI of how you set these up, hit save, them jobs would exist and they'll just run automatically exactly to how you set them. Okay, I ran through a lot there, showed you a lot of the tool. I'm happy to call it I don't know if there's potentially more, Marcel, you'd like me to share and show, but I'm happy to kind of field any potential questions now if that is a good time to do so.
Thank you very much for this great presentation. So it was really amazing to get an overview. So let us jump into the questions, and I will translate them. So let me see what we have here. So the first one. Do you have a Slack integration or a Teams integration so that do you offer something like that to inform the team members that perhaps a deployment is done or something like that?
Yes, so it would be a case of you're able to be notified however you'd like to be notified of a successful deployment. So a common one would be if you're using Slack or Microsoft Teams, you can set up a channel that would let kind of the team know what's going on within Gearset.
Oh, great. The next one, one moment. Can we use data deployments for seeding a sandbox with data?
Yes, you can. So when you set up a data deployment, you essentially, it's a similar UI to the compare and deploy with the metadata. So you're able to take data out of production, take that to wherever you'd like, and you're also able to mask that data as well. I guess best case scenario, you don't have real life emails getting pinged off when you're doing testing, but also oftentimes there is a more legal aspect that you can't have production data existing elsewhere. So absolutely, the data deploy is used quite regularly to seed lower environments with useful testing data.
Great, thanks. So the next one, can you deploy between two production orgs?
Yes. So there's kind of no limit to the combinations of where you can deploy to or from, as long as they're connected up to your Gearset, both of them. There's nothing to prevent you from deploying from one production to another.
Okay. Do you support GitHub or GitLab as a version control for continuous integration?
Yeah, absolutely. So we support both GitHub and GitLab, sorry, out of the box, as well as Bitbucket and Azure DevOps. But ultimately, we also support custom repos. So yes, we'd be able to support the source control provider that you're currently using.
So the next one, can you run automatic Apex tests every day?
I believe so. I think that's what would unit testing be. I may ask Dan Fenner to confirm, but my understanding is that's what the unit testing would be. That's Apex class. Is that correct, Dan?
That's correct. Yep, you'd set up your unit testing job, and then they would be automatically run on a 24-hour period.
Okay, great. How quickly do Gearset users see value after buying the tool? So, what is your what do you can say to that question?
Yeah, I guess it is very individual to the teams, how quick they kind of get up and run with it, whether they're kind of try and get alongside their existing process in the first instance to see the value. But as I kind of alluded to, we try to make the tool, and I would argue successfully made it quite intuitive, easy to use, easy to implement. So value can really be gained from the off. And if that isn't the case, we're very keen on supporting our customers. So not to kind of drill into the business model necessarily, but we don't tie customers into contracts. It's a subscription. So it's very much in our best interest for you to use the tool and use it well and get as much value as possible. So any of our customers, they ever reach out for help, we're only too happy to kind of jump in and help them and show them how they can best gain value from the tool. But generally speaking, I would say very quickly is kind of the answer to that.
Okay, good. So the next one is, can the customer change the PMD rules?
Yes, they can. So from within the app, top right corner, there's a little Gearset cog. You can click on the My Account, and underneath there's several different tabs. One of them is static code analysis. We have our own Gearset rule set, but you're able to create your own rule set and turn any particular rules on or off, and also edit those rules as well. So an example off the top of my head is one of the rules is excessive class length. You're able to change what excessive means essentially, and you can kind of change the severity of a particular rule. But yeah, you have complete customizability over the rule sets.
Okay, so do you offer trainings or support in German? So I can answer that. So if you need support in German, yeah, feel free to contact us. So we will help you to get set up and yeah, configure what you need and what is the best for your environment. So yeah, this was the last question. So thank you very much for this good questions from the round. And yeah, I give over to Sarah to close it now.
Ja, vielen Dank. Ja, wir hoffen, das Webinar hat Ihre Erwartungen erfüllt und Ihnen gefällt die Lösung von Gearset. Joe Moss hat es angesprochen, Sie haben die Möglichkeit, Gearset im vollen Umfang 30 Tage kostenlos zu testen. Kommen Sie gerne auf uns zu, wenn Sie in die Testphase starten möchten. Gerne besprechen wir auch mit Ihnen natürlich Ihre individuellen Anforderungen in einem Nachfolgetermin. Kommen Sie da gerne auf uns zu, auch wenn Sie sich für andere Salesforce-Themen interessieren. Ja, es sind keine Fragen mehr eingegangen, dann schließen wir an dieser Stelle das Webinar. Wir wünschen Ihnen einen schönen Tag und würden uns freuen, wenn Sie auf uns zukommen. Vielen Dank.
Vielen Dank zusammen. Tschüss.